Hey, I'm Zach, and when I was 18 years old, like most kids, I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do with my life. Right out of high school, I was working at an auto body shop, and I love working on cars. It was something I did growing up. My grandparents always did it, my dad did it, and pretty much everybody I knew worked on cars or was in the trades, but I figured out that the hobby I enjoyed doing, like automotive, wasn't really what I wanted to do for a job. Morning, piggies. My uncle, who owned a commercial plumbing business, needed some help on a job running some airlines. I was between jobs, I needed the money, so I decided to give him a hand. I grew up in the trades, I grew up around automotives, I've always worked with my hands as a kid, so this complex work as a plumber definitely appealed to me, and I really enjoyed it right from the start. Hey, pig. After helping my uncle on that first plumbing job, I started to really enjoy the work, and he saw how hard of a worker I was, so it just worked. I then started helping him on other jobs and eventually ended up being a full-time employee for him. These chicks go absolutely crazy over fly larvae. They get the zoomies. I think that's the funniest thing. I really enjoyed working on those commercial plumbing jobs. It felt like it was something new every single day, and we were up in the big skyscrapers in Seattle working in the Microsoft buildings or the AT&T buildings, and working in Bellevue. It was always something new, and it was very fulfilling. The start of my plumbing career was really a very fulfilling thing for me, and it was a lot of fun working with my uncle. He was a ton of fun to work with and was really good at teaching me the trade, and I was learning a lot really early on. Hey, pigs. Fast forward to 2021, I was working for a service plumbing company in the Seattle area, and I was doing great. I had worked my way up to being one of the most productive plumbers on the team and was running my own van, and I was making a lot of money really early on in my life. But I was finding I wasn't too happy. I had always had a business mindset, and I had always wanted to start my own business and be my own boss. And so I decided to finally take that leap and make the jump and start my own plumbing business. Now, there's a lot of money to be made in plumbing, even if you don't own a business. It is a wonderful career, very good benefits, and for the most part, if you find the right company, you're gonna be treated really well. A lot of the guys I worked with were in their 50s and had been working for the same company for 15, 20 years, and if you plan it right, you can be set up by the time you retire. So in March of 2021, I was tired of working for the company I was working for. It just wasn't working out for me, and I decided to make the leap and start my own plumbing business in our local area of Carnation, Washington. I was gonna provide all plumbing services, but I was gonna focus mainly on water heaters, and that was gonna be my niche. Hey, chickens. My goal was to provide quality service for a fair price and provide some sort of transparency in a trade and in a skill that tends to have a bad rap for taking advantage of customers. I had seen too many companies and sadly had worked for a couple companies that would promote not so good business practices of taking advantage of customers, selling them things that they didn't need. And when I started my plumbing business, I wanted it to be based on integrity. I didn't want to have any part in scamming customers or anything like that. There really was a need for a quality plumber in my area, and I'll have to make another video about my success in the plumbing business and how all that went. Needless to say, business was booming for me. I was the only one plumbing, and so there wasn't very much overhead. And by about the second month, I was basically fully booked out and constantly busy until up until I decided to sell my business. Now, I think I should backtrack a little bit, because before I started my plumbing business, Ashlyn and I, this was during the start of COVID, and Ashlyn and I had decided to get some backyard chickens, just a couple chickens for some, farm fresh eggs. I'd never been around chickens or farm animals very much in my life, and the ones that I was around was, some backyard chickens my grandma had growing up, or, a couple of times going onto the dairy farm that my uncle had. But other than that, I really didn't have any experience with livestock or chickens or any animals other than dogs. And that was kind of the start of our journey into homesteading or farming, whatever you want to call it. And it's so funny looking back now to think that just getting some backyard chickens was the start of all of this, which we will get into later in this story. But we loved our backyard chickens. It was so nice always having farm fresh eggs at the ready, and we loved sitting on the back porch, relaxing, watching them free range. It really was just the start of something beautiful for us. With some guidance from my uncle, who had his homestead for many years, and watching YouTube, people like Joel Salatin or Justin Rhodes, they were teaching us how to homestead, how to take care of animals, and how to raise them in a way that was kind of lost and something that we had gotten away from with modern agriculture. It was people like my uncle, Joel Salatin, Justin Rhodes, that really inspired us to start learning about regenerative agriculture. We loved learning about things like the deep bedding method. If you're living on a small plot of land and you don't have a lot of room for livestock, you can absolutely still have them and give them a good life by deep bedding them in their living pens, which is where you add more wood chips, more sawdust, more hay, more straw, and you build up that bedding pack, and at the same time gives you compost. I love learning about self-sufficiency and homesteading so much that it inspired us to take another step in that direction and get a new livestock animal. My aunt and uncle, I'm talking about a lot of aunts and uncles in this video, and they're all separate. The plumbing uncle is different than the homesteading uncle, which is different than the dairy farm uncle. But I have an aunt and uncle that own a dairy farm, and periodically they would have baby calves that they didn't need. So we decided to go purchase a calf and raise it up for beef and give us a brand new learning experience and take us another step towards that goal of self-sufficiency. We had that calf for about 7 months, raised it up to probably about 600 pounds or so, and eventually butchered it. We raised that calf on a deep bedding method because we only lived on a 1/4 acre. Half of our family probably thought we were crazy for doing that, but we used Premier 1 netting to give her a little bit of grass at a time, so that way she didn't destroy it all, and we would basically just move her through the yard as we needed it. So we raised her to butcher weight. We butchered her. She was probably about 600 pounds or so, not too big, but I'd built a little walk-in cooler using a cool bar and an AC unit in the backyard, and that's how we butchered her. It was quite the learning experience. We learned a lot. I figured out that I really loved this homesteading thing. I loved learning where our food comes from. I loved feeling like I was more self-sufficient, and eventually we decided that it was time to take another step, and the next step for us was going to be pigs. Hey, buddy. This is our steer Oak. We're gonna probably be processing him December or January. If you've been watching the channel long enough, you probably know who all these people are, but this is Buddy. This is our Angus bull. We're gonna use him as a breeding bull eventually. And of course, we have Rosie, the star of the show. She is our milking cow that we have not yet milked because this last year she actually lost her calf, sadly, and didn't come into milk. She had aborted the calf pretty early, so we didn't get any milk from her, but she is bred back again, so hopefully early next year we have a new calf and we can milk her and everything's good. Now, during this time of raising this calf and getting some pigs, I had started my business, and the business was doing great, like I said earlier in the video, and I was busy. And I had noticed that the business was starting to pull me away from something that I had really started to enjoy. And that's a tough dilemma when you're making a ton of money and you're, succeeding in life more than you ever have, but at the same time, the thing that's helping you succeed is also pulling you away from, your dreams, really, and something that I had really started to enjoy and had become a really big hobby for me. And I have to say, I guess it was my fault because I was plumbing for a long time, almost a decade, and I had my plumbing business. It was growing like crazy, and I was just busting my butt to get that thing to where I wanted it to be. And then at the same time, I guess I shot myself in the foot and really took a liking to this homesteading thing, which is kind of a different life. And where we lived, I wasn't going to be able to do both of them at the same time, or at least do both in the way that I would have wanted to. I noticed that I'd be at work and I would be on a job and I'd just be thinking about homesteading, and in between jobs I'd be watching all sorts of videos to learn as much as I possibly could, and it was kind of pulling me away and affecting my mindset on the job. And of course I still did an amazing job and worked my butt off for those customers, and it wasn't a problem of that, but it was just the passion of continuing the business and, hey Rosie, and growing it to where I wanted to started to die off a little bit because I was more interested in homesteading and raising animals and farming and wanting to live that life. Now you can obviously do both. You could run a plumbing business and do some homesteading on the side. I am not a fool. I know that's possible, but where I had my plumbing business was kind of outskirts of the city, but also pretty close to the city. And so it was kind of difficult to own land, homestead, and do it affordably all at the same time. So as we figured out that we weren't going to be able to buy land in our area, the idea of selling our house became more likely as we continued on this journey of homesteading and wanting more space to have more animals. And it took some convincing for Ashlyn, but she really enjoyed our animals. I think she saw how happy homesteading and this sort of life made me, and she came around. So we decided to think about putting our house up for sale and looking for land. And at the start of it, I actually wasn't going to sell my business. I was going to keep my business, keep working, hopefully hire some people to let me kind of ease off a little bit and go back to my hobbies a little bit more while still having the business and growing that, but having time to do other things that I wanted to do in my life. And so we were looking at Washington. We looked all over the place in Washington. We really wanted to stay on the west side, and there's no hate about the east side of Washington. It's a beautiful place, but it just wasn't what we wanted. It didn't have the environment we wanted. We love the greenery, which is why we're here in Kentucky. It's beautiful here. And we loved it in Western Washington as well, but we wanted more sun. It was a huge predicament that we were in, trying to figure out where we wanted to live. But in the start of us deciding to sell our house, we were gonna stay in Washington. And we looked at houses down in Chehalis, and we were looking at houses over by the Olympic Peninsula and up north by Mount Vernon, and we were looking all over the place. And the problem was all the property we were looking at was insanely high priced. If you live in Western Washington, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Land is really hard to come by in Western Washington. Aside from it being a very expensive state to live and buy a house in, land itself is really hard to find. And if you do find land, a lot of it is wetlands, which is stuff that you can't build on, you can't really use. So we were running into a lot of that, and we kind of figured out that if we were going to buy a property in Washington, we were going to have to get a mortgage because we weren't going to be able to pay cash using the sale of our house and just my income from the plumbing business. And so we decided that it wasn't worth getting a mortgage for 30 years, having to work our butt off for 30 years just to finally enjoy a homestead and finally grow a homestead. I mean, by that time, I'm in my mid-50s, so it just didn't seem like the right choice, and we decided to do something else. We then decided to go crazy and start looking at Idaho, Oregon, Montana, kind of the bordering states around Washington. We were finding that they weren't priced where we wanted it to. If we were going to move that far, we wanted to make sure that it was going to be well worth it. We weren't just gonna save $20,000. We wanted to make sure that there was a real savings on buying land. And we also found that Oregon, Idaho, Montana really weren't environmentally what we wanted. It wasn't as green, they didn't get as much rain, they got really, really cold, which is something we didn't really want to be around too much. And so we finally said, if our family's gonna have to take a plane ride to come see us, then it doesn't really matter where in the country we are, because the plane ride's gonna only be maybe an hour or two longer than it would have been if we lived a little bit closer. So that's the next step in our journey. Hey there, Rosie. That's a good girl. I don't know if all cows are always this sweet, but Rosie is just the sweetest cow. She loves her rubs. She loves to lick you, and she's a great cow. By this point, it was obvious. We were gonna sell the house, sell the business, and we were gonna move all the way across the country. I worked my butt off for that business and was pulling 80 hours a week and really working hard to get it to where I wanted it to be. And I did. Within that first year, I took it from nothing to doing $500,000 just in my first year by myself. And it was a huge part of my life. It was a huge confidence boost in my life that the skills I thought I had and the potential I thought I had was really starting to show for the first time in my life. And of course, I had a work ethic, and I've always been such a hard worker since I was a kid. But the business side of things, it was really showing that I knew how to run a business, I knew how to advertise and market, and I knew what the community wanted, and it was such an amazing feeling giving the community something that it needed and really gaining a level of respect in a positive way, not in an egotistical way, but gaining a level of respect as somebody that's appreciated in this community. That business was everything I thought I wanted in life. It was financial security, it was respect, it was freedom, it was so many different things that I wanted in life that are beautiful, and it was amazing, and I won't hate on it because it gave us everything we have today. But it was amazing how quickly I was willing to let it go. And I think that was a big eye-opener, and that may sound kind of strange, but I think it's actually a beautiful thing, because I had always led by money, right? I was very money motivated. Now, don't take that the wrong way. I didn't cheat customers or anything like that. I worked hard for my money, and I did it respectfully and honestly. But my whole life, I enjoyed money because it was financial freedom for me. It was freedom to buy the things I wanted, to live the life I wanted, and I just loved getting home, just seeing all the hard work I had done pay off. And for the first time in my life, I had taken a passion for something that isn't necessarily led by money or, respect necessarily. It was more about self-sufficiency, a more natural way of life, and just a love for the world in its natural state. And to this day, I do not regret selling that business one bit. I haven't looked back. Sure, maybe I miss the big paychecks sometimes, but honestly, I am more at peace and happier today than I ever have been in my entire life, than I ever was making tons of money in my plumbing business. And it really goes to show you that even somebody like me who loved money and loved the freedom of it, just when you find the right thing in life that makes you happy, the money's worthless. It means nothing to me. And sure, money can buy you opportunities and all that, and I'm not a fool to say that money isn't very important in life, but if there's anything you get out of this video, it's that even making $500,000 a year doesn't beat out the happiness of purpose and fulfillment in your life. And like I said, I'm gonna make a video separate of this video. This video is more about how I went from being a plumber to a farmer or homesteader, but I'm gonna make another video at some point about the specifics of my plumbing business and what I did to be successful and what it meant to me at that time in life, and we'll have a separate video on that. So we had started this whole journey of looking across the country for different property, and we had gone to all different states. I mean, we didn't leave one state out. We were deciding based on natural disasters and the economy and the price of land. Because of the work Ashlyn does, she needed to live near a decent sized city to do her work. We had made a list of all the things we wanted, right? And we made a list of things that needed to be there for our property, and we made a list of things that we had hoped could be there for our property, and then maybe another list of bonus things that if this was on our property or in the community, it was just going to spark the interest on that property itself. And that's what I encourage you to do. If you're looking to move across the country and make a huge move, make a list of things that are the most important, and if the property doesn't align with that list, you don't buy the property. Make another list of things that would make this property value a little bit better for you, some things that would spark your interest a little bit more, and then maybe a bonus list of things that, you know, maybe there's good health care in that area, or, you know, you have a grocery store close. Just things that maybe aren't so important, but will play a role in your life when you move to that property. And so that's what we did. We looked all over the place. We looked in Michigan, because I have a brother in Michigan. We looked in Ohio. We were looking at Pennsylvania, North Carolina. West Virginia was a big one we were interested in, surprisingly enough. West Virginia was interesting because it had really good prices. And so we were really interested in West Virginia for a long time. We were also very interested in Kentucky, Missouri, and we knew that a big one for us was we wanted to stay as far away from Tornado Alley as we possibly could, while still keeping cheaper prices and still keeping, you know, the warmer weather. Now, moving to Kentucky now, I understand when people say that they don't know if Kentucky wants to be Florida or if it wants to be Michigan. I understand that now because we had negative 20-degree weather, and 3 weeks later it was about 70 degrees. So that's some wild weather that I've never experienced. But one of the important things for us, because we came from Washington State, was that we didn't want it to rain every single day. And living in Washington State my entire life for 26 years, I realized that it didn't rain every single day. But if you're on the west side, or like us at the base of the Cascade Mountains, it felt like it rained constantly. Carnation and the Snoqualmie Valley got hit with rain all the time because the weather would come in, it would hit the Cascade Mountains, and it would just sit there in the valley. And so that was a big factor for us. We wanted a little bit more sun, and so when we were looking at places, we would go look at the average sun per year, and the average rainfall per year, and the average snowfall per year, and counting in the rainfall and the amount of sun you get a year, and wanting to be away from as many natural disasters as possible, and having a cheap standard of living. There was really 2 states that were going to fulfill those for us, and that was Kentucky and West Virginia. And so March of 2022, we actually took a trip, and we were going to spend half of our time in Kentucky, half of our time in West Virginia. So we flew into Louisville, we got an Airbnb in Lexington, we stayed for a few days, and then we drove to West Virginia, we stayed for a few days. And we were actually leaning more towards West Virginia, or at least I was. I know Ashlyn may have been skeptical on it, and I'm glad I listened to her, because we went to West Virginia and we stayed in Ashland, and we weren't big fans of it. And because we went to West Virginia and we had actually stayed in Kentucky, which is in Ashland, but you have Ashland, Portsmouth, and Huntington, which are all right on the Ohio River. And we had looked at some houses in the Huntington, Portsmouth area, and we really just didn't like it. Those towns seemed to be pretty run down for us, and we didn't really like the haulers there very much. We didn't like the steep valleys so much. It seemed like there was a lot of flooding, and it just really wasn't giving us a good feeling. And if you're looking at property, no matter where you live in the country, I really recommend that you lead by feeling. If you go to a place and it doesn't feel right, it's probably not the place for you. And I'm glad we went and looked at some properties. We went back to our Airbnb in West Virginia there, and we sat and we talked, and we said, you know, I don't really have a good feeling here. I don't feel happy. I don't feel like this is going to be the place for us. And I'm really glad that we decided to pack it up a couple days early, drive back to Kentucky, and we spent the last 2 days in Kentucky and driving around, really enjoying the horse farms near Lexington. And we knew that we didn't want to live in Lexington. We wanted to live on the outskirts because living near Lexington is pretty expensive. And so that's what we did. We decided that Kentucky was going to be the place. We flew back to Washington and we started making our plan. We started looking at properties. We just started looking at putting our house up for sale. And here we are today. We bought a 26-acre Amish property in northeastern Kentucky, and it is everything we could have wanted in a property. We had lots of land for animals and land enough for expansion of animals, so we could have cattle and pigs and chickens and who knows, maybe sheep or goats down the line, and maybe even a donkey for Ashlyn. She loves donkeys. Maybe even a horse for Ashlyn as well. We'll have to see. But we bought our 26-acre Amish property. We just loved it out here. It was perfect distance. Again, on that list of things that we needed for our property, being within an hour of any major city was very important to us. And so, we live about 15 minutes away from Lexington, and Ashlyn commutes every day to work, but it works out really good for us because we get to have this beautiful land far away from the city like we wanted, but we also get to take advantage of having some jobs and, the shopping of Lexington or bigger cities around us. Now, this property had everything we wanted. It had the 26 acres, like I said. It had barns, and then we have a shop back there, and we had a creek, which wasn't a thing that needed to be on the list, but it was a bonus. We had a creek. If you've seen past videos, we have a separate 10 acres on the back of the property that's just totally separate from the front, feels like a whole different world, and it was just perfect. And one of the things that I really wanted, being a plumber, working with my hands, working in construction my entire life, we wanted to buy a house that needed work, and that's exactly what this needed. And buying an Amish property, well, there was no electricity, there was no plumbing, there was nothing. It was just a stick frame house, and we had metal ceiling with plywood walls. It was just as basic as you can get. And it was perfect because the structure was built really well, but it needed everything else, and I was able to provide a value and increase and gain equity in a property. And that was really important to us because we paid cash for this property, and that was probably the most important thing that we did moving out here, and probably one of the most important things for a successful future for us was buying this property outright. We don't have a mortgage to pay for, and that's important for us because we wanted the financial security to be able for me to stay home and build this house, take care of the farm, start a farm business. It eventually ended up having a YouTube channel like you're watching right now, which we didn't really plan much on. And this channel actually started as a way for me to share with our family back at home, and it's grown into something pretty amazing. So thank you to all you viewers, and we really hope you enjoy the channel. But back to our story of how we moved out here, and this place was perfect. It was exactly what we wanted, and to this day, we love this property so much. There's so much room for expansion. There's so many projects to do, and it was everything we wanted. And so when we found this property, we put in an offer, put in a cash offer. They decided to take it. We were contingent on selling our house back in Washington because we didn't want to sell our house to not get a house and, be stuck living with family and whatnot. And so we were contingent. Now, we had some troubles in our real estate deals. You can imagine, this Amish family who didn't have cell phones, and it wasn't easy to communicate with them, and so things would take a lot longer. The agent would come, show up, maybe they weren't home, that sort of thing. So we had some complications, and then we had complications in our house in Washington. So we owned a single-wide mobile home in Washington, and if you've ever owned a single-wide mobile home, it is kind of tricky to sell because if it's on a trailer, it's not real property. Ours was on a foundation, so they viewed it as real property, which is very nice, but you have to deal with all kinds of titling things and different mortgages and different structures of funding. It's just all sorts of craziness. So we had some troubles, but in the end, we sold our house. We bought this house. We said goodbye to Washington, and we said goodbye to the business, which I had sold to another company that I had actually worked for before I started my business. And we said goodbye to our family, who we miss every single day, and thankfully we get to spend a lot of time with them. They come out and see us all the time, which is wonderful. I'm so thankful for the success we had in Washington between selling our house and selling the business. We have never looked back since, and Ashlyn and I have never been so happy and so fulfilled in our entire lives. My grandpa always loves to tell me that as you get older, you start to see life in straight lines. And I think when I first heard that, I didn't really quite understand what he meant by that. But as I get older and as we've continued on this journey into Kentucky, it's just so amazing how we can see that all of this that we have today started with some backyard chickens on a 1/4 acre in Carnation, Washington. For those of you that are working a job that you're not necessarily happy with, or maybe isn't allowing you to live the life you want to live, I hope this story is a bit of an inspiration to you. We did this at 26 years old. We had, of course, the love and support from family, but when we moved to Kentucky, we didn't know anybody. It was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life, because I was just a small town boy in Washington who had been raised in the same valley for 26 years, had never really left it, and this was a huge journey for us. And of course, you can imagine me selling my business after just 1 year, and of course, thankful for the success, but the potential that business could have had, it wasn't easy selling that business at first. And like I said, we sold our business, we sold our house, we moved across the country, we left all of our family in Washington, and we don't regret it one bit. This is one of the best things we could have ever done in our lives, and the journey is just beginning for us, and we have so many different things we want to do, so many businesses we want to start, so many adventures we want to take. I hope this video is a little bit of encouragement for you if you are just feeling kind of stuck in life and you're working the same dead-end job, not doing the things you want to do in life. I encourage you to just every day take a step towards your dream, take a step towards the success you want to see, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.